Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you my third mock draft of the NHL offseason. Stanley Cup was handed out just last night. The Florida Panthers beat the Oilers in 6 games. The draft order for the first round is finally complete. And there's been a lot of rumors circling around the draft these last few weeks with the draft combine, a lot of teams meeting with prospects, and people are getting a better idea of who teams might be looking at. So I'm going to be jumping into some of those rumors. It's going to be a bit more of a wild off draft or mock draft, a little more interesting picks here and there that are sort of just based off what we've been hearing, some late risers, not such a consensus mock draft here as we get into it. But at the top, it's still consensus. Number 1, Islanders, Matthew Schaefer. Been over the last 2 mock drafts. I had my number 1 prospect in my rankings video, so be sure to check that out for my full thoughts on a lot of these prospects and anyone who was in that range in the top 32 that might not be in this mock draft. But yeah, Schaefer's amazing, future number 1 defenseman for the Islanders, no question there. And same thing goes for number 2, Michael Misa to San Jose. No need to dive much deeper into it than I have in previous videos. He's going to be an elite number 2 center behind Macklin Celebrini. The Sharks have got a loaded prospect pool with Michael Misa in it. It's going to be a dominant set of line mates or teammates there. At number 3 at Chicago, that's when the draft really starts. There's a lot of potential options here for Chicago. I'm sticking with Porter Martone, who I had in the last mock draft. It's going to be a tough thing. I think Martone could very well go here. I think this is where he will go. I don't see the Blackhawks passing on him. I think he's a really good fit next to Connor Bedard. The issue lies in there's a lot of centers available, and I feel like the centers might go early in this draft. That seems to be the trend that teams are leaning towards. And I think if a guy like an Anton Frundell goes at 3, Porter Martone could start to slip really far down the board because he doesn't play center, and a lot of teams are looking for that power forward center. And Martone has some question marks surrounding his skating. I think he's a fine skater and will be fine at the NHL level, but I think Martone is a candidate to really slip down the board here if he doesn't go at number 3 to Chicago. But I do have him at 3. I think it's a really good fit in Chicago. At number 4, this is where the wild stuff kind of starts. You've probably seen a lot of mock drafts having this pick. It's Brady Martin to Utah. This was a rumor rising out of the NHL draft combine. Utah reportedly really likes Brady Martin. They did a lot of scouting on him all season, but odds are they did that scouting assuming he'd be there at 14 where they were. I don't know if their thought process has changed much. They still obviously really like the prospect because they've done a lot of work into him because they expected him to be available at their pick, their original spot, but they're still looking, they're still very interested in him. So we'll see if he is actually the guy here, but they're looking for a power forward to be their second line center behind Logan Cooley to add some size and physicality to that lineup. Brady Martin might be the guy for them. He might be the guy they're looking at, and this really shakes up the rest of the draft as well. To me, I think I'd prefer an Anton Frundell who's got a little more skill, or a Caleb Desnoyers with the two-way play, or even, taking the shot on Roger McQueen, or taking, if Porter Martone's there, taking him to be your power forward or your big-bodied forward in your top 6. But for now, Brady Martin seems like a real option here at number 4, and this is probably his ceiling. I think at this point he's a top 10 lock, but this is a spot he could definitely land at. At number 5, the Nashville Predators land Anton Frundell, and they're pretty. I'd imagine they're pretty happy about that. Getting an elite scorer adding to this prospect pool, that elite top end piece that they're currently missing. This is the top end piece. This is a huge piece for Nashville, and if they're a team that is looking to compete, or not necessarily compete, but get back to competitiveness, because they are an older roster that spent a lot of money last year in free agency on the likes of, over the past 2 years with Ryan O'Reilly. They signed Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, Brady Shea. They've got UC Saros locked up, Roman Josi locked up, Philip Forsberg locked up. This isn't a bad roster, and it's not a young roster either. If they want to flip around to competitiveness soon, I think Anton Frundell is probably the guy. He's one of the closest to NHL ready, probably the closest guy to NHL ready outside the top 2 due to his size, playing pro hockey in Sweden, and he has an NHL ready offensive punch with his shot and his skills in the O-zone. So Anton Frundell feels like a really good fit to Nashville. At 6th overall, the Philadelphia Flyers, I have them taking James Haggins. This is another fit that I love. Get a true playmaking centerman to pair with Matvei Michkov to really create a dynamic 1-2 punch on that top line for the next 10 years. This is a really good fit. I think it would, the puck moving would be really good, and it really would help Michkov open up it would help him open up a lot more chances for himself. You know, Hagens can create on his own, and then by consequence leaves more space for Michkov on the ice, and he's able to hit him with some nice passes, create some good chances for him, and Michov's got a wicked shot, especially on the one-timer, so I think these two would be a really good duo. I think Caleb Desnoyers is also a shout there, but I do have him going at 7 to Boston. For the Bruins, I think it's best player available for them. They don't have a good prospect pool. They're kind of in purgatory area, middling. They could be a wild card contender next year. They could be back here next year. Who really knows with Boston? So to me, don't overthink it. You need a top end prospect. Grab Caleb Desnoyers. Consensus-wise, he's the clear-cut best prospect. I have Victor Eklund ranked above him, but that's my own personal rankings. The NHL as a whole, with the scouts and the analysts, they have Desnoyers above Eklund. I think it's also a safer bet to take Desnoyers here, get the two-way centerman who can play both ends of the ice really well. He's got some good offensive upside. I like the Desnoyers fit quite a bit to Boston at number 7. Now at number 8, it's the pick I've made in all the mock drafts, Radim Murtka to the Seattle Kraken. I just don't see a world where they pass on him. The only way I think Radim Murtka does not go here is if Porter Martone or James Hagens slips. Hagens could slip because he's a little more smaller, didn't have a great year, and teams are in the market for big bodies this offseason. And Martone could slip because he's not the centerman people are looking for, and there's been a big run on centers to start this draft. If both those two are there, I could see Seattle taking the shot at him, or I could see a team trading up. I think the Pittsburgh Penguins are a big candidate to trade up, especially if Porter Martone slips. He's a guy they've really done a lot of scouting on. He's a guy they reportedly are really in love with. So if Martone starts to slip, keep an eye out for the Penguins to try and use their obscene amount of draft capital over the next 3 drafts to trade up and secure a player like that. But if Seattle's sticking and picking, Radim Murtka should be the pick, especially with the way this board has fallen. You need a defenseman, and grabbing one that's also a right shot, 6'6", two-way defenseman, those don't come around very often. Take your shot on Murtka and move on. Like, this is arguably the best player on the board. You could debate that. I wouldn't have him as the best player on the board, but you could debate he is, and he's no question the best defenseman on the board, and he's a rare breed of defenseman who could do everything you want him to do on the ice while also being massive, eating minutes, and being right shot, which is very important in the NHL today. At number 9, the Buffalo Sabres. They're a tough team to mock for because who knows what they're really looking to do with their roster as a whole. They're going to go through a lot of changes. I'm just going to give them Jake O'Brien. It feels like the safe pick. Grab an elite playmaking centerman. They have plenty of depth down the middle of the ice, but I think Jake O'Brien could easily make the transition to the wing, and he might just have to make the transition to the wing if he can't add some size and muscle to his frame. But there's a ton of skill here. One of the best passers, some of the best vision in this entire draft class. I think this fit is a really good fit, and I think with a lot of the shooters that Buffalo has, with the likes of JJ Peterka, if he sticks around, Tage Thompson, Yuri Kulich is a really good shot, Jack Quinn's a big shooter, all those kinds of guys. A guy like Jake O'Brien could be a good mix into that top 6 in the future to help push them along. But Buffalo also could trade back. Buffalo also could just trade this pick straight up for some immediate help if they really want to get things rolling, because I think this is kind of a do or die offseason for Kevin Adams and his tenure in Buffalo. At number 10, the Anaheim Ducks. They're another interesting team to mock for. They're pretty well off. It seems like they're looking to get a push going towards the playoffs next year. So I'm going to have them taking a shot on Roger McQueen. There's, the reports are just a back fracture was a one-time thing and he should be fine. Anaheim likes their big bodies. They like their big centermen. But the question is, do they feel they already have enough? You're going to have, Seneca's a big winger. You got Mason McTavish down the middle. You got some other big forwards up front there. Do you need another one? But I think Roger McQueen could be the pick here. They like the big forwards, so it fits the mold, and they're not too concerned about consensus. So they took back at Seneca at 3 last year. And Mason McTavish, when he went 3, it's turned out to be a really good pick, but it wasn't the consensus pick at number 3. So for Anaheim, they'll take who they want. They'll take who they're high on, and I think Roger McQueen could be that guy. There's a ton of upside here if he can stay on the ice. At number 11, it's a dream scenario for me if as a Penguins fan. Victor Eklund here at number 11. The Penguins are one of the few teams I've seen really in on Eklund. he's a candidate to slip, as he does in this mock. An undersized winger is really just not what these teams seem to be looking for in the top 10 of this draft class. No one seems to be overly invested in it, and I've seen Eklund slip even past Pittsburgh. To me, I don't see him making it past Pittsburgh. They took him out to dinner at the Combine. They interviewed him heavily. They scouted him heavily all season. I think this is a guy that the Penguins are in on heavily, and if he's on the board, I don't see them passing up on him unless some miraculous way Porter Martone or James Haggins are there. Those are the only two other candidates slip to this point. I think the Penguins really like Victor Eklund and will take the shot on him if he makes it to 11. At number 12, a pick that I'm assuming is going to be the Penguins pick, but still for right now, up until 48 hours before the draft, the Rangers have the pick. And I've got him taking Keyshawn Aitchison. Could be your Keandre Miller replacement to a degree. Plays a little bit more, not necessarily intensity than Keandre Miller, but just a little bit more chaos. Does a little bit of everything. He's good offensively. He's got a really good shot. He's pretty clutch as well. He scored some pretty clutch goals last year for Barrie, and he's really, really physical. He doesn't have the skating of Keandre Miller, but he ups it on the physicality side, and both are pretty good in the offensive zone, as Miller may be on his way out as an RFA. But Aitchison, a good two-way defenseman who can add some punch to that on the offensive side of that blue line as well for the Rangers in the future. At number 13, the Detroit Red Wings grabbing Justin Cabano out of Blainville-Boisbrand in the QMJHL. I think, arguably one of the best pure goal scorers in this draft class. Detroit doesn't need a ton of anything anywhere. They got a good prospect pool. They're pretty well-rounded. I think this is, one, it's BPA. It's the safest pick on the board. And two, maybe they could use a bit of scoring punch. They don't have a real, you got Lucas Raymond and you got Dylan Larkin. Alex DeBrincat's good as well. There's not a lot of just pure goal scorers. I think that could be a good piece for them. I don't see them taking a defenseman here because they have their three-headed monster of the future with ASP, Simon Edmondson, and Moritz Seider. So I think a forward is what they should be looking at. They have two goalies as well, even though you're not taking one here at 13. But I think Cabano is a good fit for Detroit and add some scoring to the lineup in the future. At number 14, the Columbus Blue Jackets, they're kind of taking the shot on Carter Bear. Tore his Achilles at the start of 2025. A really unfortunate injury as he was having a great draft year, but he's already back out on the ice, and I think Columbus has plenty of young talent. They got plenty of talent coming up through the system, plenty of talent already on their roster. I think you can afford to be the team that takes the risk on Carter Bear. If he pans out, you get another great top-end guy to add to your lineup. And if not, it sucks, but you have plenty of pieces already in your lineup. You're not desperate for a piece. There's not a real piece you desperately need. So I think Carter Bear would be a really good shot here, and I think it's a really good team to take the chance on him and his injury. At number 15, the Vancouver Canucks grabbing Jackson Smith and stopping his slide here. They're another BPA team. Who knows what the future of the entire Canucks organization is over this summer. Going to be a really interesting offseason to watch. We'll see what kind of moves they make. Besser's probably on his way out. Pia Suter's probably on his way out. Who knows what the future of Quinn Hughes is? Who knows what the future of Elias Pettersson is? There's a lot up in the air. Who knows what the future of Thatcher Demko is? So there's a lot of up in the air things in Vancouver this offseason. I think here you just stay safe. You take the best player. You grab Jackson Smith. There's some question marks about his mental game, but really, he's got lots and lots of skill, a really good offensive upside, and is pretty solid in his own end as well. This is a good fit here in Vancouver. At number 16, Montreal, grabbing Lyndon Lakovic. I really like this fit. I haven't had Lyndon Lakovic make it this far, I believe, in any of my mocks. I like this fit a lot. Montreal needs a second line center in the future. Lakovic won't play for them next year, and they want a second line center for next year as well. But for their long-term future, they have Michael Hage, but Michael Hage is very similar to Nick Suzuki. He doesn't have the defensive game, but in terms of a smaller, skilled forward. Lyndon Lakovic is a big-bodied, physical power forward with a good scoring touch. He's what they were hoping Kirby Dach could tap into with his size and his potential, but hasn't been able to stay healthy. He could be that guy for them. He could be that physical, big second-line center that really adds some punch to their lineup, which is right now a pretty undersized lineup looking at their future outlook. So I like this fit a lot for Montreal. I think it's the perfect guy to grab. And then once again at number 17, another guy that I really like this fit, it's Logan Hensler. right shot defenseman who's a really stout defender. You know, his offensive game didn't really come into effect this past year, but he's got good size and he's got a solid defensive game and a solid defensive head on his shoulders. That's the kind of defenseman they need for the future. You look at their future D-men, you know, Lane Hutson's an elite offensive threat. Logan Mayu's a great offensive guy who doesn't have a ton of defense. Caden Blue's a good defensive guy. David Reinbacher's a two-way guy. Another shutdown guy like Logan Hensler, and you're really rounding out that D-core with some solid, you know, mix of high-end offensive upside and some good stout defenders. I think this is a really good fit here. I think odds are at 16-17, the Habs go forward defense. They have a good prospect pool at both ends, so just take one of each to help keep it rounded out, keep it well-rounded, have options in all areas for the upcoming future. At number 18, it's a pick I've had a couple times. I had it in the first mock draft I did. Ben Kindle to Calgary. He's playing in Calgary in the WHL, but I surely have scouted a lot of him, and he's a goal scorer. You know, smaller, undersized guy, but he's a goal scorer, and that's what Calgary needs. They need some punch. Even in their prospect pool, you look at some of the guys they have a good prospect pool, but offensive guys on the forward side. Andrew Bashaw, not really that. Matt Bay-Gridden, you know, he's solid. Sam Honzek's a two-way guy. Luke Misa's got some offensive skill, but doesn't have the upside of a guy like Ben Kindle. So they don't really have that elite scorer in their pool offensively. They have like Zane Perek and some good offensive defensemen. But on the forward side, they don't have anyone that's going to just put pucks in the back of the net. And that's what they need long-term, because that's what they lacked at this year. Obviously, Ben Kindle won't make an immediate impact, but it's a piece that you can look to for the future to get into the lineup to add some scoring punch in the next couple of years. At number 19, Cullen Potter going to the St. Louis Blues, a very smooth skating forward out of Minnesota. I think this is going to be another interesting fit. You know, played or Arizona State, sorry, not Minnesota. But I think he's a really solid piece, a really, not a late riser, but people are coming on to his game, coming around on his skating ability and how that could be a good piece for a lot of teams. St. Louis doesn't have a ton of centermen. I think they have a lot of wingers that play center or centers that, you know, aren't really the best at just playing pure center. I think Cullen Potter is a guy who could work up the middle. Maybe he fits in the same blend as the guys they already have, but it gives you more flexibility. I think he could be a centerman to the line, a good playmaker with lots of speed and lots of skill going up the middle and feeding the likes of Robbie Thomas and Jimmy Snuggerud and Jordan Kyrou and all those guys. I think this is a solid fit. I think St. Louis, you know, it's not quite BPA to me, but I think it's a better fit for what they need. At number 20, I've got the Blue Jackets with Minnesota's pick via the David Jiricek trade. And I've got him taking another shot. I've got him taking Alexander Zarovsky, the Russian forward, the big Russian forward. This is a guy who's been a big riser, and you know, Columbus has a pretty good track record when it comes to Russians and bringing them over from the KHL or the MHL and developing them. They've done it a few times with a few different guys in the lineup: Kirill Marchenko, Igor Chinnikov, the likes of them. And I think this is another guy that I think could be that for them. 6'1", Russian forward who had 50 points in the MHL this year and has really, really good hands, some of the best hands in this draft class. Columbus, I think, is a team just looking to take shots. I think they're going to make their big moves, their big splashes via the free agent market, via trades in the offseason to really improve their team right now. So in the draft, why not take some long shots, not long shots, but take some high upside picks with the likes of Carter Bear and Zarovsky to potentially add even more elite pieces to your lineup at good prices down the line. At 21, the Ottawa Senators, who are officially keeping their pick this year, and they're going to be giving up the 2026 first. I'm not sure I agree with the risk on this move, taking the risk on giving up what could be a lottery ball in the Gavin McKenna sweepstakes. But I think Ottawa will be in the playoffs next year, so I assume they think that same sort of thing. But it's just this pick isn't that highly touted, and next year's draft class is much deeper and much better. So to me, I would have just given this pick up, but it is what it is. They're sticking and picking at number 21, and I've got them taking Cole Reshny, a good scorer that Ottawa could use. They need right shot guys. Reshny isn't that, but I think the other guys on the board don't really provide the offensive upside that Reshny does, and I think he fits what they could build down the line. They have a good offensive, he's an offensive defenseman in Carter Yakimchuk coming up to shore up their decor in the future, and they don't have any real forward prospects, so grab Cole Reshny to help give some more young juice to your forward core and give them some flexibility as some contracts start to expire and some vets start to age out. So I think Cole Reshny is a good fit there. They need a forward up front in their prospect pool, so grab probably the one with the best offensive upside left in the draft. At 22, I've got the Philadelphia Flyers with Colorado's first-round pick from the Sean Walker deal, taking Kurbin Limitov, another big Russian defenseman. He's been a big riser here. Philly likes their big defensemen, and they have similar to Columbus. They've been on a really good track record of bringing over Russians from the KHL and drafting Russians in general. I mean, you look at some of the guys in their team, almost their entire goalie pool is Russians, with Kolosov and Fedotov and Zavrajin, and then you have, obviously Matvei Michkov up front, who is, who's supposed to take 3 to 4 years to come over from the KHL, came over after one season to Philly and only wanted to play in Philly. So there's obviously a Russian market there in Philadelphia, and there's something that drives the players to want to play in Philly, and part of that is going to be Matvei Michkov. I think a lot of Russian players will want to play with Michkov going forward. But Limitov, he's a big defenseman, 6'4", 23 points in 46 NHL games this past year. He's got some good offensive skills, but is a big bruising defenseman that is something that fits Philly's style, and I think it's a good shot to take for the Flyers. At 23, I've got the Nashville Predators taking Sasha Boumedian. I think this is a perfect fit and a really good value pick for the Preds. I have Boumedian at number 17 on my board, and they're getting him down here at 23. This is a really, really good pick and a really good value pick up here. Just add some more punch, some offensive juice to that decor in the future. Right now you have Tanner Molendyk, who's a good two-way guy, really smooth skater, but Sasha Boumedian can be your power play quarterback for your long-term plans going forward here. And he's got the kind of skill in his bag. I like this fit a lot for Nashville. At 24, the Los Angeles Kings taking a shot on Jacob Wozniak. I don't have him as a top 32 prospect, but I think you could make the argument pretty easily to me that he is a top 32 guy. I have him at 33, so it's not a big difference anyways. But for LA, he kind of fits the style you'd want. Who knows how long it'll take him to develop, and who knows where LA will be when he finally comes over and fully is ready to play at the NHL level. But he's got good size at 6'2", along with having a really solid offensive skill set. He's got a really good shot, he's a really good passer. He's just really good in general in the offensive end. And LA constantly just needs more scoring. It's why they keep losing in the first round. They just never seem to be able to match the scoring punch of the Edmonton Oilers. So grab Wozniak. He's got really good scoring touch. He had 57 points in 40 games at the J20 level in Sweden this past year. So he's got plenty of offensive skill and also fits their mold of bigger forwards, because they like to build a big team. They don't want to just have a bunch of undersized guys, They have a big forward core. So he fits that mold, and he adds the scoring punch they could need. At 25, the Chicago Blackhawks taking a good, safe pick in Milton Gastrin. A rare breed of physical forwards coming out of Sweden with Gastrin. This is just a perfect pick. I got him at 25 on my board. I have him going 25th overall here. I think for Chicago, Gastrin's a guy who can play up and down your lineup, provide some good two-way game to you, because looking at their prospect pool, looking at their top guys, none of them are real stout defensively in their own end, and none of them are overly physical. Porter Martone's big, but he's not overly physical, and that's why I have him taking a 3, but he's not overly physical despite his size. I'm sure he'll develop that as he grows or as he ages, but I think they need that physical two-way game to their lineup, and Bedard isn't that, Nazar isn't that, Oliver Moore isn't that. They don't really have that kind of guy. Milton Gastrin can be that. He can play line 3, line 2. He's got some skill. He can maybe play line 1 if he's playing with Connor Bedard. But he'd be a good middle 6 guy who could kill penalties for you and be that good power forward, two-way forward kind of archetype for the Chicago Blackhawks. At number 26, the Nashville Predators having another great value pick in Braden Coots, stopping his slide here from, I had him at the 18th ranked prospect, and they got him at 26. So Nashville, for me, grabs the 18th and the 17th ranked prospect at 23 and 26, while also grabbing Anton Frundell at 5th. This is a really good draft for the Predators if this is how it falls. With Coots, it's simply BPA. Really strong forechecking forward who drives hard and is a pest to play against. And for Nashville, I think it's simply just there's no one that is close to him, close to his level left in the draft. I think this is really just a great pickup and a really good value spot for the Predators. At number 27, the Washington Capitals taking Shane Van Sage out of Michigan State, another big late riser, similar to the Russians I had going earlier. He's been a big riser. Plenty of people have put him into their top 32 prospects. And for Washington, they've done a great job of developing. They've done a great job of developing players out of the NCAA as well. I think for them, they'll be willing to take this shot. They've got a really good prospect pool. Why not take the flyer on the late riser and see if he can break out at Michigan State, break out even offensively at Michigan State? He had a good season, not a great season. But I think, being a year older, maybe next year he'll really be able to find that full offensive bag and be able to tap into that and keep that development going. But I think Shane Van Sage is a guy who's probably going to sneak into the back end of the first round. It's more a matter of where. And that's sort of the thing with a lot of these guys in this range. Since this draft class is so close from around prospects like 20 to 50, that back end of the first is going to be really wild and super unpredictable. A lot of guys are going to sneak in and a lot of guys are going to slip out. And it's going to be interesting to see who those guys are, but I'd put money that Van Sage is going to be one of the guys that slips into the back end of the first round. At 28, the Winnipeg Jets grab Malcolm Spence, just almost a surefire prospect kind of thing. Low, as I said when I was talking about him in the prospect rankings, low ceiling, high floor kind of guy, a guy who you could see being near NHL ready in the next couple of years. Due to his size and his physicality and the way he plays the game. He's not a super skilled forward, so he doesn't need to hone in on the other side of the game. He can play a third line role pretty quickly at the NHL. And I think for Winnipeg trying to compete, some of their other prospects will be coming up soon. Having a guy like that, having a bigger guy along to jump in would be really nice, especially being a lot of their prospects are pretty small. Brady Yeager's a smaller guy. Colbert Freddy's a smaller guy. So they have that smaller size, so add Malcolm Spence, grab a forward with some good size to him, and I think it's a good fit. At 29, the Carolina Hurricanes stopped the Josh Ravensburgen slide. This was just a cause of a lot of players rising and teams not necessarily needing a goalie. In my eyes, I think I've come around on Philly probably avoiding a goalie. Columbus, I could take one, but I had them taking some shots on some players I think have high upside for them. And beyond that, I don't know how many of these teams in this area are going to take a goalie. Carolina, they have Kochetkov, but there's been lots of question marks around him, and he really hasn't been able to be the guy come playoff time. Freddie Anderson is coming up on 37, 38 years old, and he's very injury prone, and he really also hasn't been the guy when it matters in those late series in the playoffs. So you're not locked into a long-term goalie to me. And even if you think Kochetkov can be the guy for the next 3 years, goalies take a while to develop. Ravensburger won't be in the NHL for a good 3 to 4 years, so take him. You could potentially have your goalie of the future, and if Kochetkov really breaks out and you still have Ravensburger, there's worse problems to have than to have two promising young goalies. So I think Ravensburger fits the timeline of when Kochetkov will be around 29, and sort of you're on that. You'll know what he is at that point. Ravensburger will be ready to come up and will either succeed and take that role from Kochetkov, or we'll just back him up as Kochetkov works out and he's a 1A, 1B kind of thing. At number 30, San Jose Sharks, I've had them taking Henry Brustevich a couple of times here, and it seems to be a pretty good fit there to grab a right shot defenseman. But in this mock, Blake Fiddler slipped out to pick 30, and he's a right shot defenseman that I think fits more of what they need. Brustevich is a offensively gifted top 4 defenseman. Blake Fiddler is a 6'4" big defensive. He has an offensive game, but he's a defensive guy first who can really throw the body around, and that to me is a better fit in San Jose than a Henry Brustevich because they have so many offensive guys, with Sam Dickinson and Luca Cagnoni. You throw in Blake Fiddler to that mix, right shot guy who can insulate some of those defensive lapses, this is a really good fit and a really good value pickup as well here at 30th overall for the San Jose Sharks. At 31, the Philadelphia Flyers via the Edmonton Oilers. I got them taking William Moore. I think grabbing a two-way center should be a priority for them. A lot of times I have them just taking Caleb Desnoyers at pick number 6, but with James Higgins there, I went with Higgins instead. And because of that, they don't have that two-way center for the future. I think Jet Luchenko can play a two-way game, but he's a little smaller, and he might end up moving to the wing regardless. William Moore is a really good two-way center with good offensive upside, and I think he wouldn't be playing under Sean Couturier likely, but he could still learn a lot from him during the off seasons in Philadelphia to really hone in on that two-way game that I think could be his calling card in the future if he really taps into that game. And then finally, at pick number 32, the Calgary Flames via the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, grabbing Cameron Reed. BPA pick here pretty simply for me. He's by far the highest guy left on the board. And for Calgary, that's sort of the thing they're known to do. They've been doing it for the past couple of draft classes, and it's worked out pretty well for them. They just seem to take the shots on guys other people let slip. Zane Parekh slipped all the way to them. They didn't think twice. They grabbed him up, and they did it with Luke Misa, with Henry Muse, and those guys all look to be developing really, really well. No reason to change that philosophy up here. Cameron Reed slips. Grab another great defenseman to add to this decor, and especially because a lot of their defensemen are actually right shots, which is a weird problem to have. Like Parex's a right shot guy, and so is Muse. Cameron Reed's a left shot guy, so you really have a well-rounded core especially when you throw Hunter Brustevich in there. And Rasmus Andersson might be on his way out, so the more defensemen, the merrier for the Calgary Flames. And yeah, that'll end the third mock draft of the off season. I'll have one more mock draft coming out. I'm going to try and get it done as close to draft day as possible to try and really have a good, accurate sense of who's going where and what teams are going to take. But yeah, that'll do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment your thoughts down below, and anyone you think was missed or went too early, went too late. And subscribe to see some more content, and I'll see you in the next one.